In this tutorial series, we're going to cover Subtlety rogues. Let's start by looking at stats and reforging. As you can see from the stats equation, agility is by far the most important primary stat. The three most important secondary stats are hit rating, haste, and expertise. Let's move on to reforging. When reforging, you'll have three primary objectives. The first objective is to reach the hit rating cap of either 6% for heroics or 8% for raids. Second, you'll want to maximize haste. Reforge your weakest stat into haste. And last, you'll want to reach the expertise cap of 26. Let's take a look at some useful gems for Subtlety rogues. You can see a list of relevant and useful gems on the screen right now. As a rule of thumb, you'll want to gem with straight agility, those being delicate inferno rubies, unless a socket bonus is plus 20 agility. Let's move on to some recommended glyphs for Subtlety rogues. Starting with recommended prime glyphs. As you can see on the screen right now, we have a list of 5 different prime glyphs. 2 of those are recommended and the other 3 are sort of preferential. The 2 recommended prime glyphs are the glyph of slice and dice, which increases the duration of slice and dice by 6 seconds, and the glyph of backstab. This causes your backstab critical strikes to grant you 5 energy. The remaining 3 glyphs that are considered preferential are the glyph of shadow dance, the glyph of hemorrhage, and the glyph of eviscerate. I ended up going with the glyph of hemorrhage. Let's take a look at the recommended 4 major glyphs for Subtlety rogues. We have the glyph of sprint, the glyph of tricks of the trade, the glyph of feint, and the glyph of sprint, which should be right here. I actually just switched the glyph of feint out. Originally I had the glyph of fan of knives. The reason why is from the research I've done, fan of knives is relatively weak for Subtlety AoE DPS, and I've changed my playstyle a little bit such that I use feint more because of the property it has, the damage mitigation property it has for AoE damage. As you can see from the tooltip, it says, in addition, reduces the damage you take from area of effect attacks by 50%. I've actually been using that quite a bit, and I like it a lot. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the more interesting Subtlety talents. Like the other talent discussions in the other videos, we're not going to discuss every individual talent. Instead, what we're going to do is take a look at the more interesting ones. Let's take a look at some of the talents in the Subtlety tree that increase your damage output, starting with improved ambush. What it does, it increases the critical strike chance of ambush by a massive 60% and also buffs the damage by 15%. Opportunity increases the damage of mutilate, backstab, garrot, and also ambush by 30%. Sanguinary vein extends your hemorrhage talent. What sanguinary vein does, it increases the damage dealt to targets that are bleeding by 16%. The Subtlety tree also has a couple of energy talents. One of them is Relentless Strikes, which gives your finishing moves a 20% chance per combo point to restore 25 energy. So if you think this through, if you have 5 combo points, it's guaranteed to refund 25 energy. The other energy talent in the Subtlety tree is Slaughter from the Shadows. It reduces the energy cost of backstab, ambush, hemorrhage, and fan of knives. As a Subtlety rogue, you're not really going to be making much use of fan of knives though. Let's head back up to the top of the Subtlety tree and take a look at some of the other interesting talents. Hemorrhage is one of your main Subtlety attacks. What it does, it's an instant single target melee attack that does more damage if you have a dagger equipped. It creates a bleed effect that does 40% of the damage done by the hemorrhage over 24 seconds. It also places a debuff on the target that increases damage done by bleed effects by 30%. That debuff lasts 60 seconds. And last, it also awards a combo point. We'll talk about where hemorrhage fits into the single target strategy later in the tutorial. Find Weakness is one of your most important subtlety talents. It causes all of your attack abilities that you use from stealth, namely Ambush, Garrett, and Cheap Shot, to create a debuff on the target that allows you to bypass 70% of the target's armor for 10 seconds. We'll talk about where Find Weakness fits into the single target strategy later in the tutorial. Premeditation is one of your more important 20-second cooldowns. You can only use it from stealth, and it automatically adds 2 combo points to your target. More on this talent later. Honor Among Thieves is a really interesting talent that does 2 things. One, it's a raid buff that increases the raid's critical strike chance by 5%. The other thing it does is anytime anyone in your party or raid lands a critical strike, it's guaranteed to grant you 1 combo point. This only happens every 2 seconds or so. Serrated Blades is the subtlety talent that gives your Eviscerate a chance to refresh the rupture dot on your target. The way it's designed though, you have to have 5 combo points in order to guarantee that the Eviscerate will refresh the rupture dot. And that's why we'll talk about this later, but that's why it's a general rule of thumb that you should always use 5-point Eviscerates. And the last talent that we want to cover is called Shadow Dance. The way it works is it places you in a state that allows you to use stealth mode abilities like Ambush, Cheap Shot, Garrett, and so on while you are out of stealth. And we'll talk later about how you can use Shadow Dance in a DPS strategy. And that wraps it up for our subtlety talents discussion. Let's move on to a more comprehensive discussion of single target and AoE strategies for subtlety rogues.